The veterinarian's face went pale as she stared at the X-ray illuminated on the light board. "That's unusual," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Bennett, when did you say your cat started acting strange?" I clutched Whiskers closer to my chest, feeling his warm body trembling slightly against mine. "Just a few days ago," I replied, watching Dr. Morris's expression shift from concern to deeply troubled. "He wouldn't eat, kept hiding under the bed. I thought maybe he swallowed something he shouldn't have." She turned to face me fully, and I noticed her hand shaking slightly as she pointed to a bright white object lodged in my cat's digestive system. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." "This appears to be a tracking device," she said slowly. "A very expensive one. The kind used for surveillance." My first thought was absurd, almost laughable. A tracking device? In my cat? But Dr. Morris wasn't smiling. She enlarged the image on her computer screen, and there it was, clear as day, a small rectangular object with what looked like circuit patterns visible even through the X-ray. "I don't understand," I whispered, though somewhere deep in my mind, puzzle pieces I hadn't known existed were beginning to shift into place. Why would someone put a tracking device in my cat? The morning had started so ordinarily that the memory of it now felt like a mockery. I woke up in our Pearl District apartment in Portland to find Tom already gone, a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter claiming an early meeting with clients. His coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick stains I didn't recognize smudged along the rim, but I had dismissed it then. Tom worked in real estate with his sister Vanessa, and they often met female clients. I had trained myself not to be the jealous wife, the paranoid spouse who questioned every little detail. Whiskers had been acting odd for 3 days. My orange tabby, usually vocal and demanding, had become withdrawn. He refused his favorite treats, spent hours hiding in the darkest corner of our bedroom closet, and yesterday I had found him trying to scratch at his own belly with such desperation that he'd drawn blood. That's when I decided the vet visit couldn't wait any longer. Dr. Morris had been our veterinarian for 2 years, ever since Tom and I moved into the Pearl District apartment after our wedding. She was thorough, kind, and had never once looked at me with the expression she wore now, a mixture of professional concern and personal alarm. "We need to remove this immediately," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But Mrs. Bennett, I need to ask you something, and please understand I'm asking as someone who cares about your safety. Do you have any reason to believe someone might be monitoring your movements?" The question hung in the sterile air of the examination room. Monitoring my movements? The idea seemed ridiculous. I was a graphic designer who worked mostly from home, creating brand identities for small businesses and startups. My life was ordinary to the point of boring. I spent my days at my computer, took Whiskers to the park on sunny afternoons, met my best friend Lauren for coffee twice a week, and had dinner ready when Tom came home from showing properties. Who would possibly want to track me? But even as I formed that thought, something cold settled in my chest. The past 6 months had been strange in ways I had refused to examine too closely. Tom had become increasingly interested in my schedule, asking detailed questions about where I'd be throughout the day. He'd surprised me with a new phone for my birthday, insisting my old one was too slow, and had personally set it up for me. He'd started working longer hours, often coming home well past midnight, and when I suggested we needed to spend more time together, he'd grown defensive, accusing me of being clingy. Then there were the small things that hadn't made sense at the time. My car's GPS history showing routes I hadn't driven. Conversations with Lauren that Tom somehow knew about despite me never mentioning them. The time I'd impulsively decided to visit a new art supply store across town and returned home to find Tom unusually interested in where I'd been, almost anxious. I had attributed it to his caring nature, his protectiveness. Now, staring at that X-ray, those puzzle pieces were forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. "I don't know," I finally answered Dr. Morris, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I really don't know." She nodded slowly, then made a decision. "I'm going to perform the surgery now to remove this device. It's causing your cat significant discomfort, and we can't leave it in there. But Rachel, she used my first name, something she'd never done before. I think you should call someone. A friend, family member, maybe even the police. This isn't normal, and if someone has gone to these lengths, you need to be careful. The surgery took 45 minutes. I sat in the waiting room, my phone clutched in my hand, staring at Tom's contact photo. It was from our honeymoon in Hawaii, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning at the camera with the sunset behind us. That man loved me. That man had promised to cherish and protect me. That man couldn't possibly have put a tracking device inside our cat to monitor my whereabouts. The idea was insane. But the alternative, that someone else had done this, was equally terrifying and somehow less believable. Who else had access to Whiskers? Who else would care about tracking my movements? Tom's sister Vanessa had a key to our apartment for emergencies, but why would she do something so invasive? My parents lived in Seattle, visited rarely, and had no reason to spy on me. Lauren was my closest friend, and the suggestion that she might be involved was laughable. I called Lauren anyway. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Rachel. Perfect timing, I was just thinking about you. Want to grab lunch? I'm near that new Thai place you wanted to try. I need you to come to Riverside Animal Hospital, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Right now. The address is on Burnside. The brightness drained from her voice immediately. What's wrong? Is Whiskers okay? Are you okay? Just come, I repeated. Please. I'll explain when you get here. She arrived 20 minutes later, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, still wearing her yoga clothes from her morning class. I met her in the parking lot because I couldn't bear to have this conversation in the waiting room where other pet owners sat with their healthy animals, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding in my life. Rachel, you're scaring me, Lauren said, gripping my shoulders. What happened? They found a tracking device inside Whiskers, I said flatly. Someone made him swallow it. A tracking device. To monitor where I go. Lauren's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, fury. She pulled me into a tight hug, and only then did I realize I was shaking. Who would do that? She whispered against my hair. Who has access to your apartment, to your cat? I pulled back, meeting her eyes. That's what I keep asking myself. And there's only one answer that makes sense. I just don't want to believe it. Understanding dawned on Lauren's face. Tom. I nodded, feeling tears prick at my eyes for the first time since seeing that X-ray. But why? Why would my husband need to track me? What does he think I'm doing? Unless, Lauren's voice trailed off, and I saw her mentally working through possibilities. Unless he's the one doing something and wants to make sure you don't find out. Making sure you're where you say you are so he knows when he's safe to do whatever he's hiding. The thought had occurred to me too, sitting in that waiting room. The late nights. The mysterious lipstick on the coffee mug. His sister Vanessa's increasingly cold behavior toward me over the past few months. The way Tom had discouraged me from joining him at work events, claiming they were boring and I'd hate them. I had accepted all of it because I trusted him, because I believed in our marriage, because I had been raised to think that suspicion was a character flaw rather than an instinct worth listening to. Dr. Morris emerged from the surgical suite carrying a small metal container. Inside, cleaned of biological matter but still recognizable, was a device no bigger than a large pill. She handed it to me with the solemnity of someone passing over evidence at a crime scene. This is highly sophisticated, she said quietly. Military grade, possibly. Definitely not something available to the general public. She hesitated, then continued. I've contacted a colleague who works with law enforcement on animal abuse cases. This constitutes abuse, Mrs. Bennett. Forcing an animal to swallow a foreign object, causing it distress and potential harm. She would be willing to speak with you if you want to pursue this legally. I stared at the device in my palm. It was heavier than it looked, cold and malevolent. This tiny thing had been inside my cat, broadcasting my location to someone who was supposed to love me. How long? I asked. How long was it in there? Based on the irritation to the surrounding tissue and Whiskers' symptoms, Dr. Morris estimated, probably 3 to 5 days. But, she added gently, this might not be the first time. If someone did this once, they may have done it before. Each device has a limited battery life. This one was probably dying, which is why Whiskers started showing symptoms. When they're functioning properly, the cat might not display obvious distress. The implication made my blood run cold. How many times had Whiskers been used as an unwitting GPS tracker? How long had Tom been monitoring me? And most chillingly, what had prompted him to start? Lauren squeezed my hand. You're coming home with me, she said firmly. Right now. We'll get Whiskers when he's ready for discharge, and you're staying at my place until we figure this out. I started to protest, to say that I was overreacting, that there had to be an explanation, but Lauren cut me off. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel, someone put a tracking device inside your cat. That's not normal marriage problems. That's not a misunderstanding. That's calculated, invasive, and honestly terrifying. You're not going back there alone. She was right, but the admission felt like defeat. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together, and it was ending in a veterinary clinic parking lot with a surveillance device in my hand. We went back inside to check on Whiskers. He was groggy from anesthesia but stable. Dr. Morris recommended keeping him overnight for observation, and I agreed gratefully. I couldn't face bringing him back to the apartment, back to Tom, back to whatever trap I had been living in without knowing it. Lauren drove me to her small house in the Hawthorne district. She set me up in her guest room, made tea I didn't drink, and sat with me in silence that felt more supportive than any words could have been. Finally, as the afternoon light began to fade, I made the decision I had been avoiding. I need to go back to the apartment, I said. I need to see what else I've missed. Lauren immediately shook her head. Not alone. If I'm right, if Tom is hiding something, I need to know what it is. And I need to get some of my things. My laptop, my work files, clothes. I can't just abandon my entire life because of a suspicion. We argued about it for 20 minutes, but Lauren finally agreed on the condition that she would come with me and that we would go when Tom was definitely out of the apartment. I texted him, the first communication since that morning. His response came quickly, too quickly for someone who was supposedly busy with clients. Stuck at a property showing in Beaverton. Won't be home until 8 at least. Why? Something wrong? I replied that Whiskers had needed an emergency vet visit but was fine now, and I'd explain later. He sent back a thumbs up emoji. No concern for the cat. No questions about what had happened. Just a thumbs up. Lauren and I arrived at the Pearl District apartment at 6. The building was one of those converted warehouses, all exposed brick and industrial windows, the kind of place that had seemed sophisticated and grown up when Tom and I moved in. Now it felt like a facade hiding rot underneath. I unlocked the door with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The apartment looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. Tom's coffee mug still in the sink, that lipstick stain still visible. The note on the counter. Everything normal and wrong at the same time. I went to our bedroom first, intending to pack a bag, but found myself standing in the doorway, seeing it with new eyes. Our bed, neatly made because Tom was particular about that. His nightstand with a neat stack of real estate magazines. My nightstand with my current read and a lamp. But now I noticed things I had overlooked before. The small security camera mounted in the corner, which Tom had installed months ago claiming it was for our protection after a break-in in the building. I had thought nothing of it then. Now I wondered what it had really been recording and who had access to the footage. Lauren was in the living room, and I heard her call my name with urgency. Rachel, you need to see this. I found her standing by Tom's home office, a small converted closet where he kept files and his personal computer. She was holding a folder, her face ashen. This was just sitting on his desk. Not even hidden. I took the folder from her. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of me leaving the apartment, getting coffee, meeting Lauren, working in the park with my laptop on sunny days. The images spanned months, maybe longer. They were taken from a distance, some clearly from a car, others from across streets or through windows. Surveillance photos. Underneath the pictures were printed documents. Bank statements from accounts I didn't recognize in Tom's name. Large deposits, regular and substantial, from a company called Sentinel Solutions. I grabbed Tom's laptop from the desk, my hands no longer shaking but steady with a rage I had never felt before. Lauren, bless her, didn't try to stop me, just kept watch by the door. The laptop wasn't password protected, an arrogance that infuriated me further. His email was open, and it took less than 5 minutes to find what I needed. Messages between Tom and his sister Vanessa. Messages that detailed everything. Vanessa owned Sentinel Solutions. It wasn't a legitimate business but a front for something far more sinister. From what I could piece together from the emails, they were running an insurance fraud operation. Tom would sell properties to carefully selected buyers, properties that Vanessa's company had secretly purchased and then would be damaged or destroyed in carefully staged accidents. The insurance payouts were enormous, split between Tom, Vanessa, and several other conspirators whose names appeared throughout the correspondence. But 6 months ago, something had changed. One of their schemes had attracted attention from an insurance investigator. The emails showed growing paranoia. They suspected someone was feeding information to the authorities. Tom had convinced himself, or Vanessa had convinced him, that I might be that someone. The tracking had started then. Monitoring my movements, my contacts, making sure I wasn't meeting with anyone suspicious, wasn't gathering evidence against them. The most recent email was dated just 2 days ago. Vanessa to Tom, we need to be more careful. That investigator is still sniffing around. Are you absolutely certain Rachel doesn't know anything? Maybe it's time to consider more permanent solutions to loose ends. Tom's response made my vision blur with fury and fear. She doesn't suspect a thing. I've made sure of it. But you're right about loose ends. I've been thinking the same thing. Let me handle it my way. Lauren read over my shoulder. We need to call the police, she said quietly. Right now. Rachel, this isn't just about tracking anymore. That last email, permanent solutions to loose ends, that sounds like a threat. Against you. I photographed everything with my phone. The emails, the bank statements, the surveillance photos. Then I carefully returned the folder to exactly where Lauren had found it. We couldn't let Tom know I had discovered any of this. Not yet. Not until I had a plan. We left the apartment and I locked the door with the same key I had used 1,000 times before, but everything had changed. In one day, my marriage had been revealed as a lie, my husband as a criminal, and my safety as an illusion. The man I had pledged my life to wasn't just cheating or hiding money. He was involved in fraud, had been monitoring my every movement, and according to that email, was considering me a loose end that needed handling. The drive back to Lauren's house passed in a blur. My mind was racing but also strangely clear. I knew what I had to do, what I had no choice but to do. Tomorrow I would go to the police with everything I had found. I would tell them about the tracking device, the surveillance photos, the emails, the insurance fraud. I would do what Tom and Vanessa feared someone was already doing. I would be the one who brought their scheme crashing down. But tonight, I let myself mourn. I sat in Lauren's guest room with my phone in my hand, scrolling through old photos of Tom and me. Our engagement, our wedding, vacations and holidays and ordinary moments that I had believed were real. Had any of it been genuine? Had he ever actually loved me, or had I simply been convenient, useful cover for his criminal activities, the unwitting wife who could provide an alibi and an appearance of normalcy? I texted Tom that I was staying at Lauren's because Whiskers needed overnight observation and I wanted to be close to the vet clinic in case of emergencies. He replied, "Okay babe. See you tomorrow. Love you." 2 words that now felt like the cruelest lie of all. Love you. As if love involved surveillance and schemes and whispered conversations about permanent solutions. Lauren knocked softly on the door and entered with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. We're going to get through this, she said, sitting beside me on the bed. You're going to get through this. And when this is over, you're going to be free of him, free of all of this darkness. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this nightmare had an end, that I would survive and rebuild and find happiness again. But sitting there in that guest room, with the weight of Tom's betrayal crushing down on me and the knowledge of what I had to do tomorrow looming ahead, all I could feel was the sharp sting of a life I had believed in crumbling into nothing. The tracking device sat in my purse, still cold and accusatory. Tomorrow it would become evidence. Tonight it was just a symbol of how blind I had been, how completely I had trusted someone who had never deserved that trust. Whiskers was safe. I was safe, for now. But everything else, my marriage, my home, my sense of security, all of it was gone. The X-ray had revealed more than anyone could have anticipated. It had exposed my husband's dark secret and shattered my world entirely. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. Lauren sat beside me in the waiting area, her hand gripping mine as we waited for Detective Richard Hayes to call us into his office. I had barely slept the night before, my mind replaying those emails over and over, seeing Tom's face in every shadow, hearing threats in every creak of Lauren's old house. At 3 a.m, I had finally given up on sleep and spent the remaining hours organizing every piece of evidence I had collected into a coherent timeline. Detective Hayes was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested he had seen too much of humanity's darkness. He listened without interruption as I laid out everything. The tracking device that Dr. Morris had removed from Whiskers. The surveillance photographs I had found in Tom's office. The emails between Tom and his sister detailing their insurance fraud operation. The bank statements showing payments from Sentinel Solutions. And finally, that last chilling email about permanent solutions to loose ends. When I finished, the detective sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Bennett, he finally said, I want you to understand something. What you've brought me is serious. Very serious. But building a case like this takes time. We'll need to verify these documents, investigate Sentinel Solutions, potentially coordinate with insurance fraud divisions and possibly even federal agencies if this operation is as extensive as these emails suggest. That process could take weeks, maybe months. I felt something inside me crack. Weeks? Months? Detective, did you read that last email? My husband and his sister are talking about handling loose ends. I'm a loose end. I can't just go home and pretend everything is normal while you build your case. He leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but firm. I understand your fear, and it's valid. But right now, we have no direct evidence that you're in immediate danger. The email is concerning, absolutely, but it's also vague. A good defense attorney could argue it means anything. What I need you to do is act normally. Don't let them know you suspect anything. Don't confront your husband. Give us time to gather solid evidence that will actually hold up in court. Lauren spoke up for the first time. So she's supposed to just go back there? Sleep next to a man who's been tracking her every move, who might be planning to hurt her? The detective's jaw tightened. I didn't say it would be easy. But if Mrs. Bennett suddenly moves out, changes her behavior dramatically, it could tip them off. They might destroy evidence. They might flee. Or yes, they might panic and do something rash. Our best chance of protecting her and building a solid case is if things appear normal while we investigate. Nothing about this is normal, I said quietly. The detective pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal cell phone. You call me if anything, and I mean anything, feels wrong or unsafe. Day or night. We'll also have patrol cars increase their presence in your neighborhood. I can't offer you protective custody based on what we have so far, but I can make sure officers are nearby. He paused, then added, and Mrs. Bennett, document everything from this point forward. If your husband does or says anything suspicious, make a note of it. Keep your phone charged and with you always. Create a safety plan, a place you can go quickly if you need to leave in a hurry. I left the police station feeling more frightened than when I had entered. The detective's caution made sense logically, but emotionally it felt like abandonment. I was being asked to walk back into a trap and smile while it closed around me. Lauren drove me to Riverside Animal Hospital to pick up Whiskers. Dr. Morris reported that he was recovering well from the surgery and could go home. She handed me his carrier with a look that said she understood more than her words conveyed. You take care of yourself, she said softly. Both of you. Whiskers meowed pitifully from inside the carrier, and I felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. He had been used as a tool in Tom's surveillance, had suffered because of my husband's paranoia and criminal activities. At least he was safe now. At least one of us was free from whatever web Tom had woven. The drive back to the Pearl District apartment felt like traveling to my own execution. Every block brought me closer to having to see Tom's face, to pretend I didn't know what he was, to act like the oblivious wife he believed me to be. Tom was home when I arrived. I heard his voice before I saw him, talking on the phone in his office. I couldn't make out the words, but his tone was tense, agitated. I set Whiskers' carrier down gently and opened it. He emerged cautiously, sniffing the air, then immediately headed for his favorite hiding spot under the couch. I couldn't blame him. I wanted to hide too. Hey babe, Tom emerged from his office, phone no longer in hand, his expression shifting into concern that now looked completely fabricated. How's the cat? Is he okay? He's fine, I said, forcing normalcy into my voice. They had to do surgery. He had swallowed something that was making him sick. Tom's face did something complicated. What did he swallow? A piece of plastic, I lied smoothly. From one of his toys probably. The vet removed it and said he should be fine now. I watched Tom's shoulders relax infinitesimally. He had believed the lie. He thought his tracking device was still functioning, still hidden, still feeding him information about my whereabouts. Good, he said, moving closer to wrap his arms around me. I was worried about you both. You should have called me from the vet. I would have come. The embrace felt like being held by a stranger, or worse, by something wearing a familiar face like a mask. I forced myself not to stiffen, not to pull away. You said you were stuck at a showing. I didn't want to interrupt. He kissed the top of my head, and I wondered how many times he had done that while simultaneously reading reports about where I had been that day, who I had spoken to, whether I posed a threat to his criminal enterprise. I'm never too busy for you, he said. You know that. The lies came easier than I expected over the following days. I fell into a routine of deception that mirrored the one Tom had been performing for months or perhaps our entire relationship. I went to coffee shops and art supply stores at predictable times. I met Lauren for lunch but kept our conversations carefully mundane, aware that Tom might have planted other surveillance devices I hadn't found yet. I smiled when he came home late. I asked about his day with feigned interest. I played the role of the trusting wife while rage and fear warred inside me constantly. Detective Hayes called every few days with updates. They had confirmed that Sentinel Solutions was indeed a shell company owned by Vanessa Bennett. They had identified at least 6 properties involved in suspicious insurance claims. They were building connections between Tom's real estate transactions and subsequent damages. But it was slow, painstaking work. Every conversation ended the same way. Just a little longer, Mrs. Bennett. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay safe. 2 weeks after my visit to the police station, Tom announced that he and Vanessa needed to take a business trip. We've got a potential deal in Seattle, he explained over dinner. Big commercial property. Could be huge for us. We'll be gone for 4 days. I nodded, pushing food around my plate. When do you leave? Tomorrow morning. Early flight. He reached across the table to take my hand. Will you be okay here alone? The question was loaded with meaning I was supposed to miss. He was checking if I would do something unexpected while he was gone, if I could be trusted without supervision. "I'll be fine," I assured him. "I have a big project deadline anyway. I'll probably just work the whole time you're gone. Boring but productive." He smiled, satisfied. "That's my girl. Always so dedicated." That night, after Tom fell asleep, I lay awake listening to his breathing and planning. For days without him in the apartment. For days when I could search more thoroughly, document everything, maybe find evidence the police could use to speed up their investigation. For days when I wouldn't have to pretend every moment. But also for days when I had no idea where he really was or what he was really doing. The Seattle story could be true or it could be cover for something else entirely. Something involving those permanent solutions he and Vanessa had discussed. Tom left at 5 a.m. I pretended to be asleep, murmuring goodbye without opening my eyes. The moment I heard the apartment door close, I was out of bed. I waited 30 minutes to be certain he wasn't coming back for something forgotten, then I began my search. I started with his office, going through every file, every drawer, every scrap of paper. I photographed everything that seemed relevant. More emails printed out and carelessly stored. Transaction records. Names and addresses of properties. Communication with people whose roles in the scheme I could only guess at. In the back of his filing cabinet, hidden behind tax documents, I found a burner phone. My hands shook as I powered it on. The text messages were damning. Conversations about timing accidents to avoid suspicion. Instructions on how to make damages look natural. And more messages between Tom and Vanessa, these ones more explicit than the emails. "We need to do something about our," one text from Vanessa read. "She's the only one who could connect us if anyone starts asking questions." Tom's response was chilling in its calculation. "I'm working on it. Trust me. When the time is right, it'll look completely natural. No one will suspect anything." I photographed every message, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Then I carefully powered down the phone and returned it to exactly where I had found it. I called Detective Hayes immediately. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Bennett? Is everything all right?" "I found another phone," I said, my voice shaking now that I was saying the words aloud. "Tom has a burner phone hidden in his office. The messages, Detective, they're talking about me. About making something look natural. About doing something when the time is right. I need you to understand how serious this is." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Did you photograph the messages?" "Yes. All of them. Send them to me right now. And Mrs. Bennett, I want you to pack a bag. Not obviously, don't empty your closet, but get together essentials. Documents, medication, anything you can't replace. Keep it somewhere you can grab it quickly. Do you have somewhere safe you can go if you need to leave immediately?" "Lauren's house," I said. "I can go to Lauren's." "Good. Keep your phone charged. Keep it with you. I'm going to escalate this internally. These new messages change things. We may be able to move faster now." I spent the rest of the day in a state of heightened alertness, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking that the burner phone was exactly as I had found it. I packed a small bag as the detective had instructed, hiding it in the back of my closet behind winter coats Tom never touched. I put Whiskers' carrier out where I could reach it easily. I rehearsed in my mind what I would do if Tom came back unexpectedly, how I would act, what I would say. But he didn't come back. Not that day or the next. On the third day of his supposed Seattle trip, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Bennett?" A woman's voice asked. "This is Angela Reeves with Pacific Northwest Insurance Investigation Division. I've been working with Detective Hayes on your case. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" We spoke for over an hour. Angela explained that she had been investigating suspicious claims linked to properties in Portland for nearly 8 months. She had suspected insurance fraud but hadn't been able to identify the key players until now. The evidence I had provided, combined with their existing investigation, was enough to move forward. "We're preparing to execute search warrants," she told me. "On Sentinel Solutions, on your husband's office, on several properties we believe were involved in the fraud. We're also going to bring your husband and his sister in for questioning. This is going to happen fast now, probably within the next 48 hours. I felt a complicated rush of relief and terror. "It's really over?" I asked. "The pretending? The waiting?" "Soon," she confirmed. "But Mrs. Bennett, I need to warn you. When people realize they're about to be caught, they sometimes act unpredictably. Detective Hayes mentioned your husband made statements suggesting you might be at risk. I want you to consider staying somewhere else until we've made the arrests." "I'm supposed to be here when he gets back tomorrow," I said. "If I'm suddenly gone, he'll know something is wrong. He might run." Angela was quiet for a moment. "You're right. But I need you to promise me something. When he gets back, you don't confront him. You don't let on that you know anything. And the moment you feel unsafe, the absolute second something feels wrong, you leave. Don't pack, don't explain, just take your cat and go. Detective Hayes has patrol units briefed on your situation. They can be at your apartment in under 3 minutes if you call." I promised, though the words felt hollow. How do you prepare for the moment your life becomes a crime scene? How do you plan for the possibility that the person you married might actually want to hurt you? Tom returned late the following evening. I heard his key in the lock and forced myself to breathe normally, to look up from my laptop with a natural smile. "Hey," I said. "How was Seattle?" "Exhausting," he replied, and something in his voice was different. "Harder." "The deal fell through. Wasted 4 days on nothing." He dropped his bag by the door and moved into the kitchen. I listened to him opening cabinets, pouring a drink. "I'm sorry," I called out. "I know you had high hopes for that property." He appeared in the doorway of the living room, glass in hand, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "It's fine," he said. "Sometimes things don't work out the way you plan. You just have to adapt. Cut your losses." He took a long drink, still watching me. "How were things here? Did you get your project done?" "I did," I lied. "Turned it in yesterday. Client was happy." "That's good," Tom said. "That's real good." He finished his drink in one swallow. "I'm beat. Going to bed." I waited until I heard the bedroom door close, then I texted Detective Hayes. "He's back. Something feels off. Can't explain it, but I'm scared." The response came quickly. "Patrol car is on your street. Arrests happening tomorrow morning at 6. Can you make it until then?" I stared at that message. 12 hours. I just had to survive 12 more hours in this apartment with a man who might be planning to kill me. 12 hours and then police would arrive and this nightmare would finally end. "I can make it," I texted back. But I wasn't sure I believed it. I didn't go to the bedroom. I told myself I was finishing work, but really I was afraid to be in the same room with Tom while he slept, vulnerable and unaware of what he might do in the darkness. I dozed on the couch with my phone clutched in my hand and Whiskers pressed against my side. Every sound jerked me awake. Every creak of the old building made my heart race. I watched the hours crawl by with agonizing slowness. 3 in the morning. 4. 5. At 5:30, as the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the windows, I heard movement from the bedroom. Tom emerged fully dressed, and my blood went cold. Why was he awake and dressed at 5:30 in the morning? He stopped when he saw me on the couch. "Why are you out here?" he asked. "I fell asleep working," I said, my mouth dry. "What are you doing up so early?" He studied me for a long moment. I could see him trying to decide something, weighing options in his mind. Then he smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen because it didn't reach his eyes at all. "I think we need to talk, Rachel," he said quietly. I think you and I need to have a very honest conversation about what you know and what you've been doing behind my back." The pretense was over. Somehow he knew. Maybe he had checked the burner phone and seen it had been moved a fraction of an inch. Maybe Vanessa had warned him. Maybe he had simply sensed the change in me despite all my careful acting. It didn't matter how he knew. What mattered was that I was alone in an apartment with a man who had just confirmed he was aware I had discovered his secrets, and the police weren't scheduled to arrive for another 30 minutes. "Tom," I said, standing slowly, my hand finding my phone in my pocket. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't lie to me anymore. I'm so tired of the lies, Rachel. From both of us." He moved closer, and I backed toward the door. My fingers found the emergency call button on my phone, pressing it without looking. "The tracking device in Whiskers," Tom continued. "That wasn't plastic from a toy, was it? Dr. Morris removed something else. Something expensive. Something I put there to keep you safe. To keep us safe. You've been going through my things. You found the phones, the files. You went to the police." His voice was rising now, control slipping. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've put in motion?" "I'm leaving," I said, reaching for the doorknob behind me. "Tom, I'm walking out this door right now." He moved faster than I expected, his hand slamming against the door above my head, blocking it closed. "No," he said. "No, you're not. We're going to sit down, and you're going to tell me exactly what you told the police, and then we're going to figure out how to fix this. Together. Like a marriage should work." His face was inches from mine, and I could smell alcohol on his breath from the night before mixed with coffee from this morning. I realized in that moment that this was who Tom had always been. The mask had just finally slipped completely away. The sound of sirens cut through the early morning quiet. Tom's head snapped toward the window, confusion and then understanding flooding his face. "You called them," he said. "Right now. You just called them." The betrayal in his voice would have been funny if I wasn't so terrified. He was angry that I had betrayed him after everything he had done. "Step away from the door, Tom," I said with a calm I didn't feel. "It's over. They know everything. About Sentinel Solutions, about the insurance fraud, about the surveillance. It's done." For a moment I thought he might actually hurt me. His hand curled into a fist, his body tensed. Then the pounding started on the door. "Police. Open up." Tom stepped back, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Then something settled in his expression, something cold and final. "This is all your fault," he said quietly. "Everything that happens now, remember that you did this." The door burst open, police flooding into the apartment with weapons drawn. Tom was on the ground in seconds, hands cuffed behind his back. An officer was asking if I was hurt, if I needed medical attention. Detective Hayes was there suddenly, appearing from the chaos. "You did good, Mrs. Bennett," he said. "You're safe now." But I didn't feel safe. I felt shattered. I watched them lead Tom out of the apartment, past neighbors who had emerged from their doors to witness the spectacle. This man I had loved, had married, had built a life with, was a stranger. Had always been a stranger. I had been married to a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to hide a criminal and a man capable of considering my death as a solution to his problems. Lauren arrived within minutes of getting my call, gathering me and Whiskers and taking us away from the apartment that no longer felt like home. The police would process it as a crime scene now. They would take every piece of evidence, document every corner. They would dismantle the life I thought I had lived and reveal it for the lie it had always been. At Lauren's house, wrapped in a blanket that didn't stop my shaking, I watched the morning news report on the arrests. Tom and Vanessa both in custody. Multiple charges of insurance fraud, conspiracy, criminal surveillance. The reporter stood in front of a warehouse identified as Sentinel Solutions headquarters. A major fraud operation spanning multiple states and involving millions of dollars in false claims had been shut down. I was described only as a witness who had come forward with key evidence. My name was protected, but my life was exposed for anyone who cared to look closely at the details. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. My parents calling from Seattle, frantic and confused. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months reaching out after seeing the news. Even distant relatives emerged from years of silence to express shock and concern. I turned the phone off. I couldn't explain to anyone what it felt like to discover that your entire marriage had been built on lies and surveillance and criminal conspiracy. I couldn't make them understand the particular horror of being watched by the person who promised to love you, of being considered expendable by the person who vowed to protect you. The legal proceedings would take months. I would have to testify, would have to relive every moment of discovery, every piece of evidence I had uncovered. But more than that, I would have to figure out who I was now that the life I thought I had been living had been revealed as fiction. I looked at Whiskers sleeping peacefully in his new temporary home, a small incision scar on his belly, the only physical evidence of the tracking device that had inadvertently saved both our lives. Everything had changed in the moment Dr. Morris had pointed to that X-ray. The device had revealed more than anyone could have anticipated. It had exposed my husband's dark secrets and shattered my world completely. And now I had to find a way to build something new from the broken pieces. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks after Tom's arrest. I signed them in Lauren's kitchen while rain hammered against the windows, my signature looking like a stranger's handwriting. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Campos who specialized in cases involving criminal spouses, had assured me the process would be straightforward given the circumstances. Tom wasn't contesting anything. He couldn't afford to draw more attention to his affairs than already existed. The apartment, the shared accounts, everything would be dissolved and divided. I would walk away with half of assets that had been purchased with stolen money, which felt like accepting blood diamonds, but Patricia insisted I was entitled to it. I couldn't stay in Portland. Every street corner held memories that now felt contaminated. The coffee shop where Tom had proposed, where I had cried happy tears and said yes to a man who was already surveilling me even then. The park where we had walked Whiskers on sunny Sundays, where Tom had probably been calculating insurance fraud schemes while I talked about my dreams of opening my own design studio someday. Even Lauren's house, safe as it was, felt temporary. I was a guest in someone else's life, displaced from my own, waiting for permission to start over. The decision came during a sleepless night 2 months after Tom's arrest. I was scrolling through job listings in different cities, not really seeing them, just moving my thumb across the screen to have something to do. Denver appeared in my search results. A mid-sized tech company called Summit Tech Solutions was looking for a senior graphic designer to lead their brand development team. The position was 3 levels above anything I had held before. Normally I would have dismissed it as out of reach, but nothing about my life was normal anymore. I updated my portfolio at 2 in the morning, removing any projects connected to Tom's real estate work, highlighting the independent clients I had built over the years. I wrote a cover letter that focused on my ability to create authentic brand identities, the irony not lost on me given how completely I had failed to see through Tom's false identity. I hit send before I could overthink it. The response came faster than I expected. A video interview was scheduled for the following week. Then a second interview. Then a third with the company's founder, a woman named Christine Park who had built Summit Tech from a 2-person startup into a company with offices in 4 states. She asked me hard questions about my design philosophy, about how I handled pressure and deadlines, about what authentic branding meant in an age where everyone was performing a curated version of themselves online. I answered honestly, more honestly than I had intended, talking about truth and lies and the importance of creating things that were genuine even when the world felt fake. Something in my raw honesty must have resonated because 2 days later Christine called me personally to offer me the position. The salary was more than I had earned in my best year of freelancing. The benefits included relocation assistance. They wanted me to start in 6 weeks. I accepted before the shock could wear off. Lauren helped me pack up the few possessions I had claimed from the Pearl District apartment. Most of the furniture I left behind, wanting nothing that Tom had touched or chosen or sat on while planning his crimes. I took my art supplies, my clothes, my computer, and Whiskers. Everything else could be replaced or didn't matter anymore. My parents drove down from Seattle to see me before I left. The visit was awkward and painful. My mother kept crying and apologizing as though she should have somehow known Tom was a criminal, as though she had failed me by not seeing through him. My father was angry, wanting to know why I hadn't called them the moment I discovered the tracking device, why I had handled it alone. I tried to explain that I hadn't been thinking clearly, that I had been in shock, that Lauren had been there and that had been enough. But I could see they felt shut out of a crisis they believed they should have been part of. We parted with hugs that felt obligatory rather than comforting, with promises to visit Denver that we all knew would be difficult to keep. The drive to Denver took 14 hours. I did it in one long push, wanting to put as much distance between myself and Portland as possible as quickly as possible. Whiskers yowled from his carrier for the first hour, then settled into resigned silence. I stopped only for gas and bathroom breaks, eating drive-through food that tasted like cardboard, listening to podcasts about anything except crime or relationships or betrayal. When I finally crossed into Colorado and saw the mountains rising in the distance, something in my chest loosened slightly. This was far enough. This was different enough. Maybe here I could become someone new. Summit Tech Solutions had arranged temporary housing for me, a furnished apartment in the Lodo district while I searched for something permanent. It was small but modern, all clean lines and neutral colors, the kind of space that had no history or memory attached to it. Perfect. I moved in with my few boxes and set up Whiskers' food and litter box in the bathroom. He explored cautiously, sniffing every corner, still skittish from the surgery and the upheaval of the past months. "I'm sorry," I told him, watching him investigate his new territory. "I'm so sorry you got dragged into all of this." He looked at me with his green eyes, and I imagined understanding there, forgiveness. Or maybe I just needed to believe something innocent still trusted me. My first day at Summit Tech was overwhelming in the best possible way. The office occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse building, all exposed brick and huge windows overlooking the city. The design team consisted of 8 people, ranging from fresh graduates to veterans who had worked at major agencies. They were welcoming but not intrusive, sensing perhaps that I needed space to find my footing. Christine gave me a tour personally, introducing me to department heads and explaining the company culture. "We build tools for small businesses," she told me. "Project management software, inventory systems, customer relationship databases. Boring stuff on the surface, but what we're really doing is helping people build their dreams. Our brand needs to reflect that. Make people feel like we understand them, like we're partners in their success." I spent the first week mostly observing and learning. Summit Tech had grown rapidly, and their visual identity hadn't kept pace. Their logo was dated, their website cluttered, their marketing materials inconsistent. It was exactly the kind of challenge I had always wanted, a complete brand overhaul with the freedom to reimagine everything. I started sketching concepts in my notebook during lunch breaks, playing with ideas about partnership and growth and authenticity. My team noticed and asked to see what I was working on. Soon we were huddled around my desk, throwing out suggestions, building on each other's ideas. It felt like collaboration in a way I had never experienced in my freelance work. It felt like belonging. 3 months into my new job, I was working late on a presentation for a major client pitch when someone knocked on my office door. I looked up to find a man I vaguely recognized from another department standing in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "I'm Daniel Green from Operations. We met briefly during your first week." I remembered him now. Tall, probably in his early 40s, with graying hair and an easy smile. He had been kind during that initial tour, asking about my move to Denver and recommending good neighborhoods to explore. "What can I help you with?" I asked, saving my work. He held up a laptop. "I'm having issues with our project management software, and IT said you're the only one still in the building who might know how to fix it. Apparently you did some troubleshooting training last week?" I had, part of Christine's philosophy that everyone should understand the products we were branding. I gestured for him to come in. "Let me take a look." We spent the next 20 minutes solving what turned out to be a simple user error, but Daniel was good company, making self-deprecating jokes about his technological incompetence, asking intelligent questions about the design work spread across my desk. When the laptop was fixed, he didn't immediately leave. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, and I tensed reflexively. He must have seen it because he quickly added, "You can absolutely tell me to mind my own business. It's just, you always eat lunch alone. You don't come to the Friday happy hours. And I get it, new city, new job, maybe you're just private. But I also recognize the look of someone who's been through something difficult and is trying to rebuild. I'm a widower. Lost my wife 4 years ago to cancer. Took me a long time to be okay being around people again." His honesty disarmed me. "I'm divorced," I said carefully. "Recently. It was complicated and messy, and I'm still figuring out how to be a person again." Daniel nodded with understanding that felt genuine. "No pressure at all, but if you ever want to grab coffee with someone who gets the whole starting over thing, I'm around. As friends. No expectations." He handed me his business card with his personal number written on the back. I'm serious about the no expectations part. I've had enough people try to set me up or fix me when I wasn't ready. Sometimes you just need a friend who understands that rebuilding takes time. After he left, I sat staring at that business card for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to maintain the careful isolation I had built around myself. But another part, the part that was tired of being alone with my thoughts, that was exhausted from carrying the weight of what had happened in Portland without sharing it, that part wanted to call. I waited a week, then sent him a text. "Coffee sometime?" No expectations, just two people who understand starting over. His response came within minutes. "I know a place that makes excellent lattes and has a dog-friendly patio if you want to bring Whiskers." Saturday afternoon? We met at a cafe in the Highlands neighborhood, and I brought Whiskers in his carrier, which Daniel had apparently meant seriously about the dog-friendly comment even though I had a cat. The staff didn't seem to mind. Whiskers sat on the patio table between us, sunning himself and occasionally demanding attention. Daniel talked about his late wife, Sarah, with a fondness that had clearly survived grief. He didn't shy away from the hard parts, the long illness, the hospital vigils, the moment he became a widower at 38. My turn to share came naturally in response to his openness. I told him about Tom, about the tracking device in my cat, about discovering my husband was a criminal who had considered me a disposable loose end. I had expected judgment or pity or the kind of morbid curiosity that trauma sometimes inspires in people. Instead, Daniel just listened, asking occasional clarifying questions, his expression thoughtful rather than shocked. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "You know what impresses me most about your story? You didn't just survive. You gathered evidence, you went to the police, you protected yourself. A lot of people would have frozen or denied what was happening. You acted. That takes real strength." I hadn't thought about it that way. In my mind, I had simply done what needed to be done, driven by fear and anger more than courage. But hearing Daniel reframe it, hearing him see strength where I had only felt terror, something shifted. Maybe I had been stronger than I gave myself credit for. Maybe surviving wasn't the same as being weak. We talked for 3 hours that first coffee meeting, long enough that the cafe staff started giving us pointed looks. Daniel told me about his work in operations, how he had thrown himself into optimizing systems and processes as a way to feel in control of something after losing control of his wife's illness. I told him about my art, about how design had always been my way of making sense of chaos, of creating order and beauty out of disorder. When we finally left, Daniel walked me to my car. "This was really nice," he said. "I mean that. It's been a long time since I talked to someone who actually got it." "Me too," I admitted. Most people want to either fix you or avoid you when you've been through something. They don't know how to just be present with the mess. He smiled. "So same time next week?" I found myself smiling back, genuinely. "Yeah. Same time next week." Our coffee meetings became a regular thing. Every Saturday afternoon, rain or shine, we would meet at that same cafe with Whiskers as our third-party companion. We talked about everything and nothing. Our childhoods, our failed attempts at hobbies we thought we should enjoy, our favorite books and movies, and the embarrassing music we listened to when no one was watching. Slowly, carefully, we built a friendship that asked nothing of either of us except honesty. Daniel never pushed for more, never suggested our relationship should evolve into something romantic. He seemed to understand that I needed space to heal, that trust was something I had to rebuild slowly. At work, my brand overhaul for Summit Tech was gaining momentum. Christine had approved my concepts, and we were rolling out the new visual identity across all platforms. The response from clients was overwhelmingly positive. Our sales team reported that the refreshed brand was opening doors that had been closed before. I was being invited to present at industry conferences, to write articles about authentic branding for design publications. My team was thriving, winning awards for campaigns we had created together. I was succeeding in ways I had never imagined possible during those dark days in Lauren's guest room. One evening, 6 months after moving to Denver, I was working late again when Christine stopped by my office. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Always," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She sat down and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I want to offer you a partnership," she said without preamble. "Not just a title change, though that too. Actual equity in the company. You've transformed how Summit Tech presents itself to the world. Our growth this quarter is directly tied to the brand work you've led. I want you invested in this company's future because I believe you're a big part of that future." I stared at her, speechless. A partnership? Equity? This was beyond anything I had allowed myself to hope for. Christine smiled at my shock. "You don't have to answer right now. Think about it. Talk to a lawyer, review the terms. But Rachel, I want you to know that this isn't charity or pity or me trying to help you because I know you've been through something difficult. This is business. You've earned this." After she left, I sat in my office looking out at the Denver skyline as lights began to flicker on across the city. 6 months ago I had arrived here broken and afraid, with nothing but a cat and a suitcase and a desperate hope that distance might equal healing. Now I was being offered a partnership in a thriving company. I had a team that respected me. I had Daniel's friendship and the beginnings of a community in this new city. I had rebuilt more than I had lost, had created something authentic from the rubble of Tom's lies. I called Daniel. He answered immediately, as he always did. "Hey, what's up?" "I just got offered a partnership at Summit Tech," I said, still processing the reality of it. "Equity and everything. Christine wants me as a full partner." The whoop of excitement that came through the phone made me laugh. "Rachel, that's incredible. We're celebrating. Right now. I'm taking you to dinner, the fancy kind where they give you too many forks and you're not quite sure what to do with all of them. You can't say no, this is happening." We went to a steakhouse in downtown Denver that absolutely lived up to Daniel's description of too many forks. Over wine and food that was almost too beautiful to eat, we talked about what this partnership meant. Not just professionally but personally. I had proven to myself that I could start over, that Tom hadn't broken something essential in me, that I was capable of building success on my own terms through actual work and talent rather than deception. "You should be proud," Daniel said, raising his glass. "Not just of the partnership, though that's amazing. But of everything it represents. You came here with basically nothing and built this entire new life. That's remarkable, Rachel." Looking at him across the table, I realized something had shifted. Daniel wasn't just a friend anymore, or rather, he was a friend but also potentially something more. The realization didn't scare me the way I thought it would. I had spent months rebuilding my ability to trust, to be vulnerable, to believe that not everyone was performing a false identity. Daniel had been patient, had let me heal at my own pace, had proven through consistency and honesty that some people actually were who they claimed to be. "I think I'm ready," I said quietly. He looked up from his menu. "Ready for what?" "To try again. Not to replace what I lost, because I don't want what I had with Tom. That was built on lies from the beginning. But to build something new. Something real. With someone who sees me clearly and still chooses to be here. Daniel's expression softened. I have seen you clearly, Rachel. From the beginning. And I'm definitely still choosing to be here. But only if you're sure. Only if this is what you actually want, not what you think you should want because time has passed or because I've been waiting. I'm sure, I said, and meant it. For the first time since seeing that X-ray at the veterinary clinic, I felt certain about something. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. Then I'm all in. Whatever pace you need, whatever this becomes, I'm here. We took things slowly. Coffee dates became dinner dates. Dinner dates became weekend hikes in the mountains with Whiskers surprisingly tolerant in a backpack carrier. We talked about our pasts without letting them define our future. Daniel told me about Sarah's last days, about the guilt he carried for feeling relieved when she finally passed because at least her suffering had ended. I told him about the surveillance photos, about the paranoia that still sometimes gripped me when I saw a car that looked familiar or noticed someone standing too close. We shared our damage honestly, without pretense, and found that our broken pieces somehow fit together in a way that felt whole. 8 months after that first coffee meeting, Daniel asked me to move in with him. His house was in a quiet neighborhood with a yard that Whiskers would love, he argued. Plus his commute to Summit Tech was half what mine was. It made practical sense. But we both knew it was more than practicality. It was choosing to build something together, to trust that we could create a partnership based on honesty rather than surveillance, on mutual respect rather than control. I said yes. The day I moved into Daniel's house, Lauren called to check in. She had been my lifeline during the darkest period, and though we now lived in different states, we talked regularly. How does it feel? She asked. Moving in with someone again. Scary? Exciting? Both, I admitted, watching Whiskers explore his new territory with cautious curiosity. But mostly it feels right. Daniel isn't Tom. This isn't that. I'm not the same person I was then either. I've changed, grown, learned what I actually need and what I won't accept. Lauren was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, Rachel. You could have let what Tom did make you bitter and closed off. Instead, you built this whole new life. You're thriving. I am thriving, I agreed, surprised by the truth of it. Against all odds, despite everything, I was actually happy. At work, my partnership with Christine was exceeding both our expectations. Summit Tech was expanding into new markets, and our brand was being recognized industry-wide. I hired 2 more designers to handle the increased workload. I mentored young creatives who reminded me of myself years ago, hungry and talented but not yet confident in their abilities. I spoke at conferences about authentic branding, about the importance of truth in design, about creating identities that reflected reality rather than aspiration. I never mentioned Tom by name, but astute listeners probably recognized elements of my personal story in the principles I advocated for. Daniel proposed on a Saturday morning hike, no fancy restaurant or elaborate plan, just the 2 of us and Whiskers on a mountain trail with Denver spread out below. He had been carrying the ring in his pocket for weeks, he later admitted, waiting for the right moment. But that morning, watching me laugh at Whiskers' attempts to chase a butterfly, he realized there was no perfect moment. There was just life, messy and imperfect and real. Will you marry me? He asked simply. Not because enough time has passed or because it's what people do. But because I love you and I want to build a future with you. I said yes without hesitation, without fear, without the shadow of Tom's lies clouding the moment. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and family, in Christine's backyard under string lights as fall turned the trees gold and crimson. My parents came from Seattle, visibly relieved to see me happy after the trauma of Portland. Lauren was my maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. Daniel's parents, who had embraced me with warmth from our first meeting, sat in the front row beaming. Christine officiated, reading vows we had written ourselves about partnership and honesty and choosing each other every day. When Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about the other ring Tom had given me, about how I had believed in promises that were hollow from the beginning. This was different. This was real. This was a foundation I could trust. Our honeymoon was a week in a cabin in the Rockies, no cell service, no internet, just us and Whiskers and the mountains. We hiked during the day and cooked simple meals at night and talked about our future. Daniel wanted to know if I'd ever thought about starting my own design agency. Christine was amazing, but did I have dreams beyond Summit Tech? I admitted I had been thinking about it, about taking everything I had learned and building something of my own. Not to leave Christine, who had given me so much, but maybe as a side project initially. A consultancy focused on helping small businesses develop authentic brands. Daniel encouraged me with enthusiasm that felt genuine, offering to help with the business planning, to use his operational expertise to set up systems that would work. 3 months after our wedding, I launched Bennett Design, taking Daniel's last name both personally and professionally. It was a signal of new beginning, a way of leaving Rachel Bennett of Portland behind and becoming Rachel Green of Denver. Someone who had survived betrayal and built something beautiful from the aftermath. My first client was a small nonprofit working with domestic violence survivors. They had almost no budget, but their mission resonated with me deeply. I took the project pro bono, creating a brand identity that conveyed strength and hope and the possibility of rebuilding after trauma. The executive director cried when I presented the final concepts. "You understand," she said simply. "You really understand what we're trying to do here." I did understand, in ways I couldn't have before Tom, before the tracking device, before having to reconstruct my entire life from nothing. Word spread about Bennett Design. Other nonprofits reached out, then small businesses, then larger companies looking for brand consultancies that prioritized authenticity over flash. I hired my first employee, then a second. Christine was supportive, even referring clients to me when Summit Tech's projects didn't align with their needs. My two professional lives, partner at Summit Tech and founder of Bennett Design, balanced each other perfectly. I had security and independence, collaboration and autonomy. I had built exactly what I needed. A year into my marriage with Daniel, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Tom, forwarded through my lawyer from the prison where he was serving his sentence. Patricia called to warn me before I opened it, giving me the option to have her review it first or simply destroy it unopened. I decided to read it, needing to know what he possibly thought he could say after everything. The letter was surprisingly brief. No apologies for the surveillance or the fraud or the threats. Instead, Tom wrote that he had been thinking a lot about our marriage, about where things went wrong. He acknowledged, in vague terms that avoided legal culpability, that he had made choices he regretted. But what struck me most was the final paragraph. "I saw the news about your design firm," he wrote. "You're doing well. Better than I ever gave you credit for being able to do. I guess I underestimated you." We both know how that turned out. I read the letter once, then filed it away in a drawer. It didn't deserve a response. Tom's underestimation of me had been his crucial mistake, the flaw in his surveillance that he never accounted for. He had tracked my movements but never understood my capabilities. He had monitored my location but never grasped my strength. He had seen me as a loose end to be handled rather than a person who would handle him. His miscalculation had freed me to become someone he could never have imagined, someone I might never have become if his betrayal hadn't forced me to rebuild from scratch. In a twisted way, Tom had given me the greatest gift possible. He had destroyed the small, fearful version of myself that had accepted his lies. He had created space for someone stronger, someone authentic, someone who knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less than truth. I didn't thank him for it. I didn't forgive him. But I understood that his darkness had somehow illuminated a path I might never have found otherwise. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, elegant cream cardstock with embossed lettering that screamed expensive. Daniel brought it in from the mailbox along with the usual bills and catalogs, holding it up with a quizzical expression. "This looks fancy," he said. "Who do we know in Portland that throws galas?" I took the invitation from him, my stomach dropping as I read the details. The Pacific Northwest Insurance Industry Annual Award Ceremony. Honoring excellence in fraud prevention and investigation. My name was listed as a distinguished guest, someone who had contributed significantly to a major case that had resulted in convictions and recovered millions in fraudulent claims. The ceremony would be held in 3 weeks at a historic hotel in downtown Portland. A hotel I had walked past 1,000 times during my old life. I hadn't been back to Portland since leaving 2 years ago. I had built my entire Denver existence as a deliberate separation from everything that city represented. Lauren had visited me twice, making the trip because she understood I couldn't return yet. My parents had met us in neutral cities for holidays. Even when Summit Tech had considered opening a Portland office, I had recused myself from the planning discussions, unwilling to have any professional tie to the place where my life had imploded. "Are you going to go?" Daniel asked carefully, reading my face. "You don't have to. I'm sure they'd understand if you declined." I stared at the invitation, turning it over in my hands. Part of me wanted to throw it away immediately, to send a polite regret and never think about Portland again. But another part, the part that had grown stronger over the past 2 years, was curious. What would it feel like to return not as the broken woman who had fled, but as the person I had become? To face the city that held so much pain but also the catalyst for everything good in my current life? "I think I need to go," I said slowly. Not for them, for the awards or the recognition. But for me. To prove to myself that Portland doesn't have power over me anymore. That I can stand in that city and feel nothing but gratitude for escaping it. Daniel nodded, understanding as always. "Then we're going together. You're not facing that place alone." The weeks leading up to the ceremony were strange. I found myself thinking about Portland more than I had in months, remembering specific streets and buildings, wondering if my favorite coffee shop still existed or if they had torn down the old movie theater on Hawthorne. I looked up the Pearl District apartment online and discovered it had been sold, renovated, and was now occupied by a young family with 2 children. The idea of kids playing in rooms where Tom had plotted fraud schemes felt surreal, like 2 different realities overlapping. Lauren called as soon as she heard I was coming. "I'm assuming you got the invitation too," she said without preamble. "Please tell me you're actually going to be there. I need my best friend back in this city even if it's just for one night." "I'm coming," I confirmed. "Daniel and I are flying in the day before. Do you want to get dinner?" "I want all the dinners," Lauren replied. "I want coffee and lunch and breakfast and every possible moment to catch up properly. 2 years of phone calls is not the same as actually seeing your face." We arranged to meet the evening before the ceremony. Daniel and I flew into Portland on a gray afternoon, rain streaking the airplane windows as we descended. "Of course it's raining," I muttered. "This city never changes." But I was wrong about that. Portland had changed, or maybe I had changed enough that I saw it differently. The drive from the airport revealed new buildings and closed businesses, construction projects and altered skylines. The city had kept moving forward while I was gone, had continued evolving without any awareness of my personal drama within its borders. Our hotel was in the Pearl District, close enough to my old apartment that I could have walked there in 10 minutes. I didn't. Instead, Daniel and I checked in, dropped our bags, and headed to meet Lauren at a restaurant in the Alberta Arts District, safely on the other side of town from anywhere that held difficult memories. Lauren was already there when we arrived, and she looked exactly the same but somehow different. Happier maybe, more settled. We hugged for a long time in the restaurant entryway, neither of us speaking, just holding on. Over dinner, Lauren caught me up on everything I had missed. She had gotten engaged to someone named Marcus, a teacher she had met at a friend's wedding. They were planning a small ceremony in the summer and she absolutely insisted I had to be there, had to be her maid of honor just as she had been mine. She told me about mutual friends from my Portland days, who had married or divorced or moved away or had babies. She mentioned casually that she occasionally saw Vanessa around town, always looking stressed and significantly older than her actual years. Tom's sister had taken a plea deal but still served 18 months, and her reputation in Portland real estate circles was destroyed. She was working retail now, Lauren said, at a furniture store in Beaverton. "And Tom?" I asked, not sure why I needed to know but asking anyway. Lauren's expression grew serious. "Still in prison. He'll be there for another 3 years at least. His parents moved to Arizona, couldn't handle the scandal and the shame. The house they owned in Alameda sold at a loss. From what I've heard, Tom doesn't get many visitors. He essentially has no one. I waited for satisfaction or sympathy or some strong emotion to surface. Instead, I just felt distant, as though we were discussing a stranger's misfortune rather than the unraveling of my former husband's life. That's sad, I said finally. Not for me, I don't owe him my pity. But objectively, that's a sad ending for anyone. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, a silent acknowledgement of how far I had come that I could feel compassion without getting pulled back into Tom's orbit. We shifted to lighter topics after that. I told Lauren about Green Bennett Design's recent expansion, about the contracts we had secured, about the nonprofit work that had become my favorite part of the business. Daniel talked about his promotion to Director of Operations at Summit Tech, about how he and I were discussing buying a larger house with space for home offices for both of us and maybe, eventually, room for a family if we decided to go that direction. Lauren looked between us with open affection. "You two are disgustingly happy," she declared. "It's wonderful. Rachel, I'm so glad you found this." "Found him." "Found yourself, really. You're completely different from the person who left Portland. Stronger, more confident. You're fully yourself now in a way you never were with Tom." Her words stayed with me as Daniel and I walked back to our hotel through the rain-slicked streets. Was I different? Or had I simply finally become who I was always meant to be, freed from the weight of Tom's surveillance and manipulation? Maybe both could be true simultaneously. The morning of the ceremony, I woke early and couldn't fall back asleep. Daniel was still snoring softly beside me, whiskers curled between us on the hotel bed. I got up carefully and went to the window, looking out at Portland waking up below. Somewhere in this city was the veterinary clinic where Dr. Morris had shown me that X-ray and changed everything. Somewhere was the apartment where I had discovered Tom's surveillance photos. Somewhere was the police station where Detective Hayes had taken my statement. All those locations still existed, but they belonged to a different person's story now. That Rachel Bennett was gone. Rachel Green stood in her place. The award ceremony began at 6 in the evening. I wore a navy dress that Christine had helped me pick out during a video call, elegant but not flashy, professional but not cold. Daniel wore a suit that made him look distinguished and handsome, and he kept whispering terrible jokes in my ear during the cocktail hour to keep me from being nervous. We mingled with insurance investigators and fraud analysts and law enforcement officials, all of whom had been part of dismantling Tom and Vanessa's operation. Detective Hayes was there, older and grayer but with the same tired eyes. He remembered me immediately. "Mrs. Green," he said, using my married name. "It's good to see you. You look well." "Happy." "I am happy," I confirmed. "Thank you for everything you did. I know it wasn't easy, asking me to stay in that apartment, to keep pretending. But you were right. It led to the evidence you needed." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, your case changed how we handle situations like that now. We have better protocols for protecting witnesses who are living with suspects. Your courage helped make things safer for others in similar situations." The actual award ceremony was held in a grand ballroom with chandeliers and round tables set with fine china. I was seated at a table with other individuals who had contributed to major fraud cases, none of whom I knew. Daniel sat beside me, his hand finding mine under the table whenever speeches grew long or emotional. Angela Reeves, the insurance investigator I had spoken with during Tom's case, was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. During her acceptance speech, she mentioned my case specifically, talked about how civilian cooperation and courage had been essential to cracking one of the largest fraud operations in Pacific Northwest history. Then they called my name. I was receiving a special recognition award for my role in providing evidence and testimony that had led to multiple convictions. I walked to the stage on legs that felt disconnected from my body, very aware that I was standing in front of hundreds of people who knew at least part of my story, who understood that I was the wife who had discovered her husband's crimes through a tracking device hidden in her cat. It should have felt humiliating or victimizing. Instead, it felt powerful. The presenter, a senior investigator whose name I immediately forgot, handed me a crystal award engraved with my name and a brief description of my contribution. As I accepted it, I looked out at the audience and spotted several familiar faces. Angela Reeves smiling with genuine warmth. Detective Hayes nodding with what looked like pride. Lauren, who had bought a ticket just to be there, wiping tears from her eyes. And in the back corner, almost hidden behind a pillar, someone who made my heart stop for a full beat. Tom's mother. I hadn't seen her since before the arrest. She looked diminished somehow, smaller and frilier than I remembered. Our eyes met across the ballroom, and I saw a complicated mixture of emotions flash across her face. Shame, grief, maybe a hint of the contempt she had always barely concealed when looking at the daughter-in-law she never thought was good enough for her son. Then she looked away, breaking the connection, and I remembered that she had lost everything too. Her son in prison, her daughter-in-law proved right about things she had dismissed, her family name tarnished, her life in Portland abandoned for Arizona exile. I gave a brief speech that I had prepared but barely remembered afterward. Something about truth and courage and the importance of listening to instinct even when it conflicts with what we want to believe. Something about how the worst moments of our lives can become catalysts for becoming who we're meant to be. The audience applauded. I returned to my seat. Daniel kissed my cheek and whispered that I had been perfect. The ceremony continued with other awards and recognitions, but I was only half present, my mind still on that moment of eye contact with Tom's mother. During the reception afterward, I was approached by several people who wanted to shake my hand or share their own stories of discovering spousal fraud or financial crimes. Some were investigators thanking me for my cooperation. Others were survivors like me, people who had lost marriages or families or fortunes to deception and were rebuilding. One woman, probably in her 60s, gripped my hands tightly and told me that my testimony during Tom's trial had given her courage to report her own husband's embezzlement. "You showed me it was possible to be scared and still do the right thing," she said. "Thank you for that." I didn't feel heroic or particularly brave, but I accepted her gratitude with as much grace as I could manage. The truth was that I had simply done what needed to be done when faced with impossible circumstances. The alternative had been to stay silent, to protect Tom, to make myself complicit in his crimes. That had never been a real option, not once I understood what he was. As the reception wound down and people began to leave, Lauren found me near the coat check. "That was incredible," she said, linking her arm through mine. "You were incredible. How does it feel?" "Strange," I admitted. "Surreal. Like I'm watching someone else's life happen." I saw Tom's mother in the audience. "Did you know she was going to be here?" Lauren shook her head. "I had no idea. I can't imagine how hard that must have been, seeing her." "Actually," I said slowly, working through the realization as I spoke, "it wasn't that hard. I felt sorry for her more than anything. She lost her children to their own choices. She has to live with knowing she raised people who were capable of what Tom and Vanessa did. That's a different kind of prison." We said goodbye to Lauren in the hotel lobby, promising to see her in the summer for her wedding, confirming that yes, I would absolutely be her maid of honor and nothing could make me miss it. Then Daniel and I returned to our room, and I carefully set the crystal award on the desk. It caught the light from the city outside, refracting it into small rainbows across the wall. "You okay?" Daniel asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "I'm better than okay," I said honestly. "I thought coming back here would be hard. I thought I'd feel angry or hurt or maybe still wounded by everything that happened. But mostly I just feel grateful." "Grateful?" Daniel's tone was surprised but not disbelieving. "For what happened? For how it ended. If Tom had been a different kind of criminal, if he had been better at hiding it or if I had been more trusting and less observant, I might have stayed in that marriage for years. Decades even. I might have wasted my whole life with someone who saw me as a threat to manage rather than a partner to cherish. Instead, I got out. I got away. I built something real with you." The tracking device in Whiskers was the most valuable gift Tom ever gave me, even though he never meant it that way. It showed me the truth in time to escape. We stood together looking out at Portland's night skyline, the city lights reflecting off wet streets below, and I felt a sense of closure I hadn't known I needed. This place no longer held power over me. The memories were just memories now, not open wounds. Tom was just a mistake I had survived, not a tragedy that defined me. I had returned to the city where my old life ended and proven to myself that my new life was solid, real, built on foundations of honesty and mutual respect that could withstand anything. The flight back to Denver the next morning felt like returning home in a way that leaving Portland never had. As the plane climbed through the clouds and the city disappeared below us, I thought about how much had changed in 2 years. I had gone from broken and afraid to successful and secure. From surveilled and controlled to free and trusted. From questioning my worth to knowing my value. The woman who had stood in that veterinary clinic and stared at an X-ray revealing her husband's surveillance device would barely recognize the woman I had become. Daniel dozed beside me on the plane, his hand loosely holding mine even in sleep. Whiskers was in his carrier under the seat, probably annoyed by the whole flying experience but tolerating it with feline resignation. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos from the ceremony. There was one Lauren had taken of Daniel and me standing together, my crystal award between us, both of us smiling genuinely. We looked like what we were, partners in every sense of the word, two people who had survived their own tragedies and found each other on the other side. I posted the photo to my business social media with a caption about being honored for courage but really just doing what had to be done when faced with truth. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments. Other survivors sharing their stories. Clients thanking me for being authentic. Industry colleagues congratulating me on the recognition. And one comment that made me pause, from an account I didn't recognize but whose message was unmistakable. I underestimated you. That was my mistake. Congratulations on your success. The account had no profile picture, no other posts, but I knew who it was. Tom, somehow accessing the outside world from prison, seeing my life displayed on social media, understanding finally what he had lost and what I had gained. I deleted the comment without responding. He didn't deserve my words or my attention or even my acknowledgement. He was the past. Denver was my present and future. My work at Summit Tech and Green Bennett Design was my present. Daniel and the life we were building together was my future. Whatever Tom thought or felt about my success was irrelevant to the reality I had created. As the plane began its descent into Denver, I looked out the window at the mountains rising in the distance and felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or acceptance, or simply the knowledge that I had survived the worst thing I could imagine and emerged stronger on the other side. The tracking device had revealed my husband's dark secret, but in doing so, it had also revealed my own strength, my resilience, my capacity to rebuild from nothing. Portland was behind me now, physically and emotionally. The awards and recognition were nice but ultimately just acknowledgments of something I already knew. I had faced darkness and chosen light. I had confronted deception and chosen truth. I had been given every reason to become bitter and closed off, and instead I had opened myself to genuine love and partnership. That was the real victory, not a crystal trophy or applause from strangers, but the life I woke up to every morning, authentic and honest and entirely my own. Tom's surveillance had been meant to control me, to ensure I stayed in my assigned role as the oblivious wife. Instead, it had freed me to become someone he could never have controlled, someone who knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less than complete honesty. The irony wasn't lost on me. His greatest weapon against me had become my greatest weapon against him. The truth he tried so hard to monitor and suppress had ultimately been his undoing and my salvation. As we collected our luggage and headed to the parking garage, Daniel asked what I wanted to do for dinner. Something simple, I said. Let's just go home. Our home. Make pasta and watch something mindless on TV and be grateful for boring, normal, honest evenings together. He kissed me in the parking garage, under fluorescent lights with travelers rushing past us pulling suitcases, and it was perfect precisely because it was ordinary. This was what Tom had never understood, what his surveillance could never have captured. Real intimacy wasn't about control or monitoring or ensuring compliance. It was about trust and choice and two people deciding every day to be honest with each other, to see each other clearly, and to stay anyway. I had learned that lesson the hardest way possible, but I had learned it completely. And now I got to live it every single day in the life I had built from the ashes of Tom's betrayal. 3 years after that award ceremony in Portland, I stood in the backyard of our new house watching Daniel play with our daughter Emma while Whiskers supervised from his favorite sunny spot on the deck. Emma was 18 months old, all curls and laughter and boundless energy that exhausted us both in the best possible way. She had Daniel's eyes and my stubbornness, and she was absolutely fearless in a way that sometimes terrified me and always made me proud. Green Bennett design had grown beyond anything I had imagined. We now had a team of 12 designers working on projects across the country, specializing in brand development for businesses that valued authenticity over flash. Summit Tech had acquired 2 smaller companies in the past year, and my partnership stake had grown substantially. Daniel had been promoted again, now overseeing operations for all of Summit Tech's regional offices. We were successful by any measure, but more importantly, we were happy. Lauren and Marcus had visited last month with their newborn son, and we spent a weekend trading stories about sleepless nights and the strange magic of becoming parents. She told me that Tom had been released from prison 6 months early for good behavior and had moved to somewhere in the Midwest, far from Portland and everyone who knew his story. Vanessa had apparently left Oregon as well, starting over in Texas under her married name. Their parents remained in Arizona, keeping a low profile and maintaining minimal contact with their children. The information felt distant, like hearing about characters in a book I had read long ago rather than people who had once been central to my existence. I felt no satisfaction in Tom's exile, no vindication in knowing his life remained small and constrained by his past choices. I simply felt nothing, which was perhaps the greatest victory of all. He had become irrelevant to my happiness, powerless over my peace. Christine had called yesterday with news that Summit Tech was being featured in a major business publication as one of the fastest-growing companies in the Mountain West. They wanted to interview key partners about the company culture and what made Summit Tech different. I had agreed to participate, no longer afraid of public attention or worried that my past would overshadow my present. The woman who had once hidden in shame over her husband's crimes now spoke openly about surviving betrayal and building something authentic from the wreckage. I had also been invited to speak at a conference for domestic violence survivors next month. The organizers had read about my case and believed my story could help others understand that abuse wasn't always physical, that control and surveillance were their own forms of violence, that leaving was possible even when it felt impossible. I had accepted the invitation with some trepidation but also with a sense of purpose. If my worst experience could help someone else find the courage to escape their own nightmare, then perhaps it had meaning beyond my personal growth. Emma shrieked with delight as Daniel lifted her onto his shoulders, her tiny hands gripping his hair for balance. Whiskers opened one eye to observe them, then returned to his nap, unbothered by the chaos of family life. He was older now, moving slower, sleeping more, but still the cat who had inadvertently saved my life by swallowing a tracking device and getting sick enough that I took him to the vet. I had stopped thinking of him as a victim of Tom's surveillance and started seeing him as the unlikely hero of my origin story, the catalyst for everything good that came after. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. She and my father were planning to visit in 2 weeks and wanted to know if we needed anything for Emma. Our relationship had healed slowly over the years, moving past their hurt feelings about being excluded from the crisis with Tom and settling into something more honest and communicative. They adored Emma with the fierce devotion of grandparents who almost missed their chance at this role, who understood now how close they had come to losing me entirely to Tom's plans. I thought about that email Vanessa had sent, the one about permanent solutions to loose ends, and marveled at how differently things could have ended. If Dr. Morris hadn't been thorough enough to order an X-ray. If I hadn't been brave enough to search Tom's office. If Detective Hayes hadn't taken me seriously. If any number of small factors had shifted slightly, I might not be standing here watching my husband play with our daughter in the backyard of a home filled with love and honesty. Daniel caught my eye across the yard and smiled, that particular smile that said he knew exactly what I was thinking, that he understood the weight of gratitude I carried for this ordinary beautiful life we had built together. Emma waved at me from her perch on his shoulders, demanding that I come join their game. I set down my coffee and walked across the grass toward them, Whiskers stirring from his nap to follow at a more dignified pace. This was what Tom's surveillance had missed, what his tracking devices and cameras could never have captured. The texture of real intimacy, the depth of genuine partnership, the simple profound joy of being fully known and completely loved. He had monitored my location but never understood my heart. He had tracked my movements but never grasped my strength. His obsessive need for control had blinded him to what actually mattered, and that blindness had been his downfall and my deliverance. As I reached Daniel and Emma, as my daughter launched herself into my arms with absolute trust that I would catch her, I felt the last shadow of Portland lift away completely. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me but by what I had built in response. Not a victim or a survivor, just a woman living fully in the present, grateful for every moment, honest in every relationship, free in ways Tom could never have allowed and would never understand. The tracking device in Whiskers had revealed more than my husband's dark secret. It had revealed my own capacity for courage, my resilience, my ability to transform trauma into strength and build something beautiful from broken pieces. That was the real story, not what Tom had done to me but what I had done for myself in the aftermath. And standing there in my backyard with my family around me and years of hard-won peace behind me, I knew with absolute certainty that I had won in every way that mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.